They said they are absolutely ecstatic and are looking forward to all the new adventures their future holds. When interviewed, their family and friends stated that they were extremely proud and hope to achieve such revered status themselves someday. We now return to our regular programming.
Good evening, everyone. Happy Wednesday evening. Glad to speak to you all in this more cozy and an intrusive environment as I have not done in some time now. After all those Alice Madness Returns plays, even though I'm definitely enjoying it, I'm just really looking forward to being able to get back to just some good old-fashioned reading now. I started a little later than I wanted to tonight, because I was having a good conversation with a good friend, which is something we both needed at the time. So this is going to be a little bit shorter than I had initially planned. We are still going through the Dunwich horror as written by H.P. Lovecraft, but last time I had mentioned that I would try reading multiple chapters in one stream because they're relatively short so far. And I had planned on doing that with this session tonight, but because I was delayed, I'll only be reading one chapter just to get myself off to bed earlier for a good night's sleep. And for those of you who may be wondering, as of the time of this recording, tomorrow is my birthday. So I'm doing what I can to make the most of that and have myself a good time celebration. I know a lot of people like to do New Year's resolutions during the New Year's. I prefer to do resolutions around the time of my birthday. That's my New Year, as it is. January 1st is everybody's New Year, but your birthday is your own personal New Year. And since resolutions tend to be personal, and I think you take them more seriously when you make them personal, I think that's a better time of the year to start making resolutions like that. I think you're more prone to keep them around that time. I don't think I'll expound upon what those resolutions are right now, partially because I think that's a little too personal to put onto a public stream, and two, because I'm not terribly certain as to what they are just yet. Still going to give myself some time to ponder that over. But I have time to think it over. And I don't want to hold you guys up any longer than I have to anyway. So, we're going to continue on with our reading. We are going into Chapter 3 of the Dunwich Horror by H.P. Lovecraft. Now, for those of you who haven't been here before, first of all, welcome. Secondly, as I may have noted in the description, this is not a prepared performance. I have not read this piece of prose myself beforehand, so I will be going into it just as blind as you may be if you're hearing of this story for the first time. Because of that, you may hear a couple of hiccups and blemishes here and there, not akin to something you would find in a professional audiobook recording, for example. So imagine instead that we are both sitting together in this cozy fireplace, in this nicely built cabin, with a warm fire in the house, and a nice, calmly strong thunderstorm outside to keep us warm. Sort of like being back in the womb again, I think. That's probably why we human beings like these kinds of pastoral settings so much. It probably reminds us of the womb in a way. That's just my speculation, getting ahead of me. But without further ado, let's get on ahead with it. Sit back, do whatever you're doing, and enjoy yourself while we read H.P. Lovecraft, The Dunwich Horror. Chapter 3. Meanwhile, old Whately continued to buy cattle without measurably increasing the size of his herd. He also cut timber and began to repair the unused parts of his house, a spacious, peaked-roofed affair whose rear end was buried entirely in the rocky hillside, and whose 3 least-ruined ground-floor rooms had always been sufficient for himself and his daughter. There must have been prodigious reserves of strength in the old man to enable him to accomplish so much hard labor. And though he still dabbled dementedly at times, his carpentry seemed to show the effects of sound calculation. It had already begun as soon as Wilbur was born, when one of the many tool sheds had been put suddenly in order, clapboarded, and fitted with a stout fresh lock. Now, in restoring the abandoned upper story of the house, he was a no less thorough craftsman. His mania showed itself only in his tight boarding up of all the windows in the reclaimed section, though many declared that it was a crazy thing to bother with the reclamation at all. Less inexplicable was his fitting up of another downstairs room for his new grandson, a room which several callers saw, though no one was ever admitted to the closely bordered upper story. This chamber he lined with tall, firm shelving, along which he began gradually to arrange, in apparently careful order, all the rotting ancient books and parts of books which during his own day had been heaped promiscuously in odd corners of the various rooms. "I made some use of 'em," he would say as he tried to mend a torn black letter page with paste prepared on the rusty kitchen stove. "But the boy's fitting to make better use of 'em. He'd ought to have 'em as well sought as he can, for they're going to be all of his larnin'." When Wilbur was a year and 7 months old, in September of 1914, his size and accomplishments were almost alarming. He had grown as large as a child of 4, and was a fluent and incredibly intelligent talker. He ran freely about the fields and hills, and accompanied his mother on all her wanderings. At home, he would pore diligently over the queer pictures and charts in his grandfather's books, while old Whately would instruct and chastise him through long, hushed afternoons. By this time, the restoration of the house was finished, and those who watched it wondered why one of the upper windows had been made into a solid plank door. It was a window in the rear of the east gable end, close against the hill, and no one could imagine why a cleated wooden runway was built up to it from the ground. About the period of this work's completion, people noticed that the old tool house, tightly locked and windowlessly clapboarded since Wilbur's birth, had been abandoned again. The door swung listlessly open, and when Earl Sawyer once stepped within a cattle-selling call on old Whately, he was quite discomposed by the singular odor he encountered. Such a stench, he averred, as he had never before smelt in all his life, except near the Indian circles on the hills, and which could not come from anything sane or of this earth. But then, the homes and sheds of Dunwich folk have never been remarkable for olfactory immaculateness. Drink sip. The following months were void of visible events, save that everyone swore to a slow but steady increase in the mysterious hill noises. On May Eve of 1915, there were tremors, which even the Aylesbury people felt, whilst the following Halloween produced an underground rumbling queerly synchronized with bursts of flame. "Them which Whately's doin's," from the summit of Sentinel Hill. Wilbur was growing up uncannily, so that he looked like a boy of 10 as he entered his 4th year. He read avidly by himself now, but talked much less than formerly. A settled taciturnity was absorbing him, and for the first time, people began to speak specifically of the dawning look of evil in his goatish face. He would sometimes mutter an unfamiliar jargon and chant in bizarre rhythms, which chilled the listener with a sense of unexplainable terror. The aversion displayed toward him by dogs had now become a matter of wide remark, and he was obliged to carry a pistol in order to traverse the countryside in safety. His occasional use of the weapon did not enhance his popularity amongst the owners of canine guardians. The few callers at the house would often find Lavinia alone on the ground floor, while odd cries and footsteps resounded in the boarded-up 2nd story. She would never tell what her father and the boy were doing up there, though once she turned pale and displayed an abnormal degree of fear when a jocose fish peddler tried the locked door leading to the stairway. Let's make sure we're pronouncing that word correctly. Since I got it right. Jocose. What does it mean? Playful or humorous. Alright. That peddler told the store loungers at Dunwich Village that he thought he heard a horse stamping on that floor above. The loungers reflected, thinking of the door and runway, and of the cattle that so swiftly disappeared. Then they shuddered as they recalled tales of old Whately's youth, and of the strange things that are called out of the earth when a bullock is sacrificed at the proper time to certain heathen gods. It had for some time been noticed that dogs had begun to hate and fear the whole Whately place as violently as they hated and feared young Wilbur personally. In 1917, the war came, and Squire Sawyer Whately, as chairman of the local draft board, had hard work finding a quota of young Dunwich men fit even to be sent to a development camp. The government, alarmed at such signs of wholesale regional decadence, sent several officers and medical experts to investigate, conducting a survey which New England newspaper readers may still recall. It was the publicity attending this investigation which set reporters on the track of the Whateleys, and caused the Boston Globe and Arkham Advertiser to print flamboyant Sunday stories of young Wilbur's precociousness. Old Whately's black magic, the shelves of strange books, the sealed second story of the ancient farmhouse, and the weirdness of the whole region and its hill noises. Wilbur was 4.5 then, and looked like a lad of 15. His lips and cheeks were fuzzy with a coarse, dark down, and his voice had begun to break. Earl Sawyer went out to the Whately place with both sets of reporters and cameramen, and called their attention to the queer stench, which now seemed to trickle down from the sealed upper spaces. It was, he said, exactly like a smell he had found in the tool shed abandoned when the house was finally repaired, and like the faint odors which he sometimes thought he caught near the stone circles on the mountains. Dunwich folk read the stories when they appeared, and grinned over the obvious mistakes. They wondered, too, why the writers made so much of the fact that old Whately always paid for his cattle in gold pieces of extremely ancient date. The Whateleys had received their visitors with ill-concealed distaste, though they did not dare court further publicity by a violent resistance or refusal to talk. That is the end of Chapter 3 of the Dunwich Horror by H.P. Lovecraft. I hope you all enjoyed this reading, whether you are viewing live or listening to a recording. I always appreciate it. Please remember to subscribe to either the Twitch or the YouTube channel if you haven't yet. Follow me on Instagram. Follow me on Twitter if you please. That's usually just my repository for links to other places where I'm posting content, but have at thee. I will see you all again very soon. I've taken the day off this Friday. It is currently Wednesday, so when Friday comes around, I'll most likely be dedicating many hours of that day to creating more content for you all to enjoy. I greatly thank you for your time. But in the meantime, until next we speak, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And God bless. I'll speak to you again soon. I'll leave you with some music before signing off on the stream. Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed that song, listeners. I have a weather-related update for you all. It's that time of year again, residents. Spring is in the air. The trees are budding, the flowers are blooming, the rains come down, the ground softens, and the dead walk the earth once again. It is important to be mindful of our new neighbors during this period of adjustment. After all, things are tough on both sides of the dirt, and we are all just trying to go about our lives.